everybody, and thanks for being here today. With me today are Assistant Attorney General Alice Casperson, Steve Rand, Kayla Carino, Criminal Justice Bureau Chief Daniel Clark, and Criminal Investigations Division. We have Sam Miller here as well. Yep. Deputy Chief. All right, so we're here to announce the findings of our investigation into alleged campaign finance violations between Unlock Michigan, Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, and Michigan, My Michigan. Unlock Michigan was a ballot question committee that in 2020 aimed to repeal the 1945 Emergency Powers of the Governor Act that Governor Whitmer used to extend the state of emergency during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Ballot question committees act in support of or in opposition to a ballot proposal which is used to bring legislation and constitutional amendments to voters at the polls. In May 2021, Robert LeBrand, retired Vice President and Legal Counsel of the Michigan Chamber of Commerce, filed a complaint with the Michigan Department of State's office with legal assistance from Attorney Mark Brewer, alleging that former Senate Majority Leader Mike Shirkey, with the help of Heather Loveridge of Bright Sparks Strategies, used Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility to fund the Unlock Michigan ballot question initiative through what the complainants called a dark money scheme. Their complaint wasn't centered on fundraising alone, as Unlock Michigan had formed a ballot committee and had the means and vehicle to fundraise transparently. LeBrand was reporting what he believed to be an operation to secretly fund the committee outside the reporting requirement a ballot committee is legally responsible for. LeBrand had filed a previous complaint in August 2020 against Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility and Unlock Michigan. And after looking into the complaint and receiving Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility's response, including an affidavit from Lombardini denying solicitation, the Department of State determined there was insufficient evidence to conclude that there was a potential violation of the Campaign Finance Act at that time. LeBrand's new complaint included Michigan, My Michigan, and the new allegations included more robust evidence of coordination that could have only occurred with intentional solicitation for Unlock Michigan through the 501c4s. Solicitation on behalf of a ballot question requires campaign finance disclosures. To not do so amounts to a criminal violation of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. The allegations included a claim that Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, two 501c4s connected to former Senator Mike Shirkey, together contributed over $2.4 million in funding to Unlock Michigan, amounting to nearly 86% of their total funding. With the new evidence, the Michigan Department of State found that there was reason to believe that Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility violated the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. After attempting to resolve the matter with the two organizations through the administrative process, and after not receiving a response for nearly 8 months, the Department of State finally turned the investigation over to the Department of Attorney General on June 3rd, 2022. Secretary Benson has shown a propensity to resolve campaign finance matters administratively with well-intentioned actors who may make errors, but the individuals involved in this set of circumstances refused to cooperate. Since then, my office, with the assistance of a team, have reviewed nearly 80,000 emails, over 1,000 additional documents, including Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility bank statements and copies of donor checks. And we have conducted over a dozen interviews, including several investigative subpoena interviews. Based on our investigation, it was determined that Heather Lombardini was a legal officer of both 501c4s, Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility and Michigan My Michigan. Both organizations shared the same mailing address and both utilized fundraising services from the Sterling Corporation, which is also listed as the same address for both alleged social welfare nonprofits. The Sterling Corporation was then reconfigured into Lambert and Company, and later Bright Sparks Strategies, of which Lombardini is listed as a founder and a partner. Heather Lombardini has years of professional experience and a long-standing reputation in the political sphere, especially in political fundraising. On its website, Bright Sparks boasts over 60 years of political fundraising experience, raising millions of dollars for dozens of clients, including caucus campaigns, independent expenditures, issue advocacy campaigns, and of course, ballot initiatives. Bright Sparks' website boasts an expertise in compliance, which they define as knowing the limits and laws. They also claim that they can help people and organizations navigate the intricacies. Sorry, Thank you. All right. With the Secretary of State, the IRS, and the FCC. Now, throughout the course of the investigation, we determined that Sandy Baxter may also have been involved in the solicitation of funds for Unlock Michigan and spoke to her as a witness. Sandy Baxter was sworn in as a witness and promised under oath to tell the truth. During the course of that interview, we alleged that Sandy Baxter flagrantly and intentionally lied to our Assistant Attorney General and investigators about her involvement in this dark money scheme. Like Lamborghini, Baxter also has years of experience fundraising and Lansing, and is reported to have made over $250,000 doing so. Had it not been for LeBrand's complaint, the campaign finance violations could have easily gone undetected, and oftentimes they likely are. After reviewing the documents obtained from our search warrants, which included several copies of checks from contributors that stated they were sending money to Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility expressly for the purpose of it being used for Unlock Michigan, we have found that both 501c3s have been coordinated with Unlock Michigan, but we allege that Mike Shirky and Heather Lombardini blatantly solicited contributions for the Unlock Michigan ballot initiative utilizing Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility in violation of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. Evidence presented in court will show beyond reasonable doubt that these organizations went beyond coordination by soliciting and receiving money explicitly for Unlock Michigan. And while the professional code of our prosecutorial ethics bars us from sharing that specific evidence today, we can show you our summary of the massive amount of money that Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility funneled to Unlock Michigan without having to disclose who their donors were and where that money was coming from. You see the chart here. Now, the difference between soliciting for and coordinating with the ballot question committee may seem like a fine line, but it's very important to distinguish between the two. Regardless of whether or not it should be, under current law, coordination itself is not a crime. An example of coordination is a ballot question committee seeking financial assistance from an organization that shares the same values, or even a specific purpose, like legal bills, but is not controlled by or managed by the same group or groups of people. Aside from being unethical, what makes these acts criminal is the intentional act of soliciting and receiving money explicitly through one organization with the express intention to support a cause that requires public disclosure of donors. And what makes it more troubling is that it was done specifically with the intent to evade that very reporting that is required under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. The issue at hand here is not the attempt to raise money for Unlock Michigan. They always had that opportunity through their publicly disclosed ballot committee. But the mechanism used here to raise the money was done so secretly with the transparency, without the transparency and the sunshine that's required by the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. Campaign finance laws, while far from perfect, are in place to allow voters to have a transparent look at where a candidate or cause are receiving their money so that voters can make a fully educated decision at the polls. And that is why ballot question committees, just like candidates, are required to report their contributors publicly under the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. The act of soliciting and receiving money for the ballot question committee, Unlock Michigan, made Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility liable to file campaign finance reports. Now, while we allege the evidence demonstrates clearly and without a doubt that Mike Shirkey not only coordinated his fundraising efforts with the ballot initiative, but also intentionally and directly solicited money on behalf of Unlock Michigan, while directing donors to go to Michigan, My Michigan, and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, he is not legally connected to either organization as a director, and therefore is not criminally liable for any alleged campaign finance violations contributed to these groups, or any violations of Michigan law attributed to these organizations. Michigan's current campaign finance laws make it very clear that a person must be the candidate, treasurer, or a person responsible for record keeping in order to be charged with failure to file campaign finance statements. Now, with that said, Heather Lamborghini, as the treasurer of Michigan, My Michigan, and president of Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, is legally connected to both organizations. And the evidence demonstrates that she knowingly and willfully violated the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. As a result, she's being charged with the following: 2 counts under the Campaign Finance Act of failing to file a statement of organization, which is a $1,000 misdemeanor fine. 1 count under the Campaign Finance Act ballot committees of failure to file a campaign statement, which is a 90 misdemeanor, and also 1 count of uttering and publishing a 14-year felony for submitting a signed document titled as an affidavit through her attorneys to the Michigan Department of State, explicitly denying any solicitation or receiving of money for Unlock Michigan. We allege that not only was this not true, but Lamborghini knew that it was not true. We also allege that Sandy Baxter was more involved in the systemic raising of money for Unlock Michigan through Michigan, My Michigan than she admitted to in her investigative subpoena testimony, and that she knowingly and intentionally provided false information while under oath. As such, Sandy Baxter is being charged with 1 count of perjury, a 15-year felony. Under Michigan's old term limit rules, our state elected officials came and went. While Mike Shirkey was Senate Majority Leader during these events and absolutely should have known better, political staff and consultants are what keeps Michigan's campaign fundraising machine moving, regardless of who is in office. And like Robin and Menard, Lamborghini and Baxter have the expertise in Michigan's campaign finance laws and connections to big money donors that allow this type of fundraising to continue through endless cycles and candidates. Without these hired guns, these dark money operations would never exist. And I argue that they are even sought after and hired for that exact skill set. And in this instance, these hired guns also lied to government officials to hide their wrongdoing, literally making the cover-up worse than the crime. I want to make it clear that elected officials should be held accountable to the full extent of the law when their actions arise to criminality. However, this is yet another example of how our current finance laws lack the definition and teeth to hold all bad actors accountable. Now, we will continue to consult with Secretary Benson and her department as the Secretary and I pursue campaign finance reform efforts working with the legislature. So first and foremost, on that note, there must be harsher penalties for violations of the Michigan Campaign Finance Act. Now, I'm not talking about one-time mistakes or small errors, but willful, insidious, repeated violations. And I'm proposing a tiered punishment approach that would include felony punishments and larger fines. Organizations like Michigan My Michigan and Michigan Citizens for Fiscal Responsibility, large cash flows are simply not deterred by a paltry $1,000 fine. We'll also be advocating to require 501c4 organizations to file campaign finance disclosure reports if those organizations are connected to elected officials or candidates for office. Similarly, all PACs, Super PACs, and 547 committees should be required to identify the original donors behind the 501c4 transfers. Additionally, there is no need for elected officials or candidates to have so many leadership PACs. As occurred here with Mike Shirkey and many others, having multiple leadership PACs allows individuals to shift money around, creating less transparency, and making these types of schemes easier to execute and more tempting to wade into. And when we get to court, the evidence will show that Mike Shirkey repeatedly bragged about controlling multiple dark money PACs during the course of this scheme. The two defendants named today not only enabled this scheme, but they both then knowingly lied to government officials in an attempt to cover up their illegal actions. And that's why the Michigan Campaign Finance Act really needs its own perjury and forgery violations similar to those in place involving our election laws. Now finally, it's important that the Michigan Department of State's office is given all the tools necessary to appropriately and properly enforce the Michigan Campaign Finance Act and to investigate alleged violations. They need things like subpoena powers and standing to apply for injunctive relief when they have reasonable belief that a violation is occurring. And that would also dispel concerns that someone could be criminally prosecuted for simply making a small mistake by giving the Department of State the resources to administratively handle even more serious violations as well. So ultimately, our campaign finance system is just fundamentally broken. 501c4s were designed to serve as social welfare organizations, not vessels for politicians to receive dark money. And I believe this is a problem not just here in Michigan, but across the United States. And I'm very hopeful that my fellow AGs, as well as legislators from across the nation, will join me in advocating for federal changes to ban C4s from political spending, require disclosure, or ban coordination in a very straightforward manner. Now, some may be asking, why does all this matter? Or even worse, just assume that this is politics as usual. Dark money threatens the impartiality of elected officials in all branches of government, and we see that far too often it lends itself to political corruption. Transparency around spending and election leads to more accountability, and it decreases the influence wealthy individuals or special interest groups can levy. Having this information allows voters to have essential knowledge when they are evaluating political candidates and issues and when voting to determine our future, both as a state and as a nation. And I would say in our research, we saw that, for instance, the state of Massachusetts is really the gold standard when it comes to campaign finance laws. And I would urge our lawmakers to take a look at the way that they've structured things in their state. And I think that if we had laws like that in place here in Michigan, as they do in Massachusetts, likely none of this would have occurred in the first place. Studies have suggested that 86% of voters believe money in politics is a direct threat to our democracy, and most people want greater transparency on both sides of the aisle. In 2010, the Supreme Court issued the seminal ruling in a case that you've probably all heard of called Citizens United that protects campaign contributions as free speech. And while Citizens United has in many ways enabled these groups to operate in the dark, the United States Supreme Court has consistently upheld political disclosure laws, solidifying the importance of political transparency in our democracy. And it is critically important that we recognize the devastating influence this has on our democracy, and we must call for a culture change from the elected officials whose names and faces drive the fundraising campaigns to the political operatives they employ who keep the machine fed term after term. And with that, I just want to end by thanking Assistant Attorney General Alex Kasperson and Special Agent Jennifer Kapuscinski, who have worked tirelessly on this case to close out this matter as quickly as possible. I thank them for their dedication and their tireless work on this very difficult and complicated matter. And with that, happy to take questions.
I just want to be clear, it's 3 felony charges against Lamborghini and one misdemeanor, is that right?
No, I don't think that's right. Opposite. It's the opposite of that, right? So let me grab the complaint. It's 1 felony charge and 3 misdemeanor campaign finance violation charges.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I just have a clarifying question. Ann Nichols from Michigan Advance. With the perjury charge, and this might be a technical question, why is it perjury and not lying to a peace officer in particular?
Because, right, because in this instance, the allegations are that, Ms. Baxter was placed under oath during the course of an investigative subpoena hearing and then intentionally lied while she was under oath. So that's what makes it perjury.
Thank you.
Greg.
Mr. Attorney General, it's Craig Mauger at the Detroit News. This press conference and the press conference you had to announce the charges against the Menards, is there a pattern here where your office is charging the consultants who are essentially hired to work for top-ranking officials, but not willing to go after the top-ranking officials? I mean, these people were. It seems like in a lot of these cases, the consultants are hired to work for someone else.
So, sure, I'd love to address that. First of all, I assume that you're referring in part to the Menards being charged.
Yeah.
And it's just so it's clear, that investigation is not over yet. So we have not yet ruled out charging additional people in that matter. But let me say this. What we have seen, and those of you who have been around Lansing circles for a long time, I know have seen the same thing. Again, especially with the very draconian term limits that we used to have in place. Elected officials come and go, but it's the political consultants that stay around for longer periods of time. They're also the ones that are oftentimes charged with having expertise in these matters, and they know how these campaigns work, and they know how to skirt the rules. And so as we have been investigating these cases, and I want to make it very clear the times that this occurs and how it occurs, and I'll get to that in a minute, but as we investigate, what we find is sometimes the most flagrant violation of the rules comes about by these individuals that, are the hired guns and are the campaign consultants. That's not to say, of course, that we don't thoroughly evaluate whether an office holder or a candidate for office has committed any crimes. It's just that, we go where the evidence takes us and we have to abide by the law. Now, in this particular instance, I think it's very clear from the evidence, and as the evidence is presented in court, you will absolutely see this, that Mike Shirkey knew exactly what he was doing. But on the other hand, the law is what the law is. I mean, it says what it says. And he is not an officer as it pertains to, the strict definition under the Michigan campaign finance laws.
Is there not, just to follow up on that, wouldn't that, what you're describing in terms of Mike Shirkey, wouldn't that fit a conspiracy to break the law if 2 people are working together as what you laid out in the press conference? He knew what he was doing, he was working with Lombardini on this. I'm just curious why that wouldn't fit that.
Conspiracy to commit a 90-day misdemeanor.
Well, is that fair enough?
Yeah, listen, that is something we evaluated. But when we looked through everything involving every legal definition, all the case law, any precedent that had been set in the past, it just seemed very unlikely as though we were going to be able to charge Mike Shirkey. And again, we don't go into a case saying we want to charge this person or that person. Again, we go where the evidence takes us. And again, I mean, you had individuals that were obviously, you know, coordinating this effort who had been paid to, you know, to ensure a certain result here, and who flagrantly violated the law when they did so. I would argue that, you know, these are individuals who know exactly how the law works. But you know, it is what it is, and I didn't go into this being like, hope I can charge Mike Shirkey. It was just, let's investigate, let's see what the evidence demonstrates, and then in the event that we find that there is criminal culpability and the evidence would support charges, then we'll charge those individuals, and that's just the end of our calculus. It did not seem as though Mike Shirkey was someone who, under the current state of our laws, you know, could be charged, and I stand by that charging decision.
Yeah, Jordan?
Jordan Harmony, Bridge, Michigan. You mentioned, you know, under the current state of our laws, and earlier in your comments you mentioned a litany of things that you would like to see changed. I guess under, you know, what you've proposed for campaign finance law changes, how would Mike Shirkey have potentially been held legally accountable for his role in this?
Well, I think first of all, one of the things that we're proposing is that if a person who is a candidate for office or an office holder is affiliated with a 501c4, that they have to register that. So, you know, and that it be clear in the laws, for instance, that if you are, first of all, that you would have to register, that it would be illegal if you, again, solicited money and you were affiliated with that, you know, with that PAC and you didn't register with it, so that would be illegal. But then, to further state that if you did illegally solicit and you were affiliated with that PAC, that would be a crime. So I think there are just different ways that we can look at this particular set of circumstances, know what some of the legal changes are that should be made, and then hope that the legislature enacts those changes. But I think, again, to that point, you know, it should be clear to people what politician is affiliated with what PAC. And I know you guys spend a lot of time and effort and energy trying to decipher that, don't you? Trying to figure out, like, what is this PAC and who's affiliated with it, what's it for, and it would just be so much easier if the law required that there, you know, if you are an elected office holder or if you are running for a particular office, that you have to formally declare that you are affiliated with that particular 501c4.
Colin?
Colin Jackson, Michigan Public Radio Network. You mentioned earlier with the minutes, for example, that case is still ongoing, any more charges could come. Is this the totality of charges we expect for this case, or is it still ongoing as an investigation?
This case is not ongoing as an investigation. These are the totality of charges. We believe we've reviewed everything there is to review, and we, you know, this is what we are left with.
Just one more follow-up if I can. Anytime there's charges in the political sphere, it's common for people to say these are politically motivated, that you're going against opponents on the other side of the aisle and not Democrats. What's your response to that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you asked that question, and I'd love to address it. You know, firstly, I have investigated and sometimes charged a lot of Democrats since I've been in office. Some of the first charges that I issued on major cases, Sharika Hawkins, who was a Democrat, who was the Southfield City Clerk. As a result of our charges against her, she's no longer the Southfield City Clerk, and she, you know, she ended up being convicted of a felony charge. Eric Smith, the Democratic county prosecutor from Macomb County, we charged him with a litany of charges. He was convicted of some felonies. He is no longer the county prosecutor in Macomb, and he served time and has, you know, been required to pay fines. He's no longer, you know, able to work as a lawyer. He's been debarred. So, you know, and I will tell you, we did a very extensive investigation into Make Your Day, which that was, many of you in this room remember, you know, an entity that was affiliated with Mike Duggan. We spent, I don't know, I think like 2 years, we went through an untold number of documents, and in that case, we did not find that there were crimes that were committed. Some of it was maybe based on technicalities, but we explained the whole thing. We actually put that report that was, I think, dozens of pages long, and we put it up on our website so everyone could read it, so that our investigation was very transparent. And we have other matters that where we've investigated the governor, and we've done the same thing. So we investigate cases when they come into us, and then we try to be as transparent as possible about, when we charge, we say everything that we can say under the rules of prosecutorial ethics. And when we don't charge, we try to be as transparent as we possibly can be about it. That being the case, let's remember how this came into us, right? This is, first of all, it started as this complaint, and again, the primary complainant is Bob LeBrand, who is a longtime Republican. He's the one who, in addition to, of course, Mark Brewer, who is a Democrat, we all know, they make this complaint to MDOS. MDOS, again, initially is like, there's not enough here, and then they submit a second complaint, and then it goes, back to MDOS. MDOS does a review. They ask for cooperation from these same individuals to investigate. And while I don't know this for a fact, I can tell you that it's probably likely that this would have ended up just as a fine with no criminal charges at all. And, I think it is likely that the, Secretary of State would have tried a way to work this out administratively with a fine. And she did that many times. As you remember with the Stanley Grott case, which involved the former Michigan Republican chair, Ron Weiser. He agreed to pay $200,000 to resolve a campaign finance complaint. Build a Better Michigan agreed to pay $37,500 as a settlement for a series of pro-Whitmer television ads that violated the law by identifying Whitmer as a candidate for governor. And the spending there could not be considered an independent expenditure because of apparent coordination with the Whitmer campaign. In 2016, the Michigan Jobs and Labor Foundation agreed to a nearly $18,000 fine involving issue ads featuring Senators Dale Zorn and Ken Horn that included four state Senate on the graphic, and the group called it a mistake by the vendor, and then they pulled the ads off the air and they self-reported the matter to the state. So, the preferred way to go about this, obviously, is to have the Secretary of State resolve it administratively and issue a fine. This is only referred to us because they refuse to cooperate. And I look at many of these other cases, right? Some of the higher profile cases. You mentioned, of course, the Chatfield investigation. Who filed the complaint on that case? It was Chatfield's own relatives. It wasn't Democratic operatives. It was his own relatives who filed that complaint with us. If you look at the signature petition case, who complained about that? Well, the 5 Republican gubernatorial candidates that were kept off the ballot. So, we have tried to be as fair and as measured as possible in conducting these reviews, and I would argue that we have. I will tell you that the people who are standing with me here now, they're not political operatives at all. These are just long-time prosecutors, and in some cases were defense attorneys who then became prosecutors. These aren't, people who hold or, ran for political office. And in many cases, I had to start off even explaining how any of this stuff worked in the first place, because this is such a complex area of the law. And, like regular prosecutors and investigators don't necessarily know or understand this. And, it took a while to really get involved for these individuals, I think, to really understand how the laws worked and to be able to, apply the evidence to the law. And I don't say that in any way to diminish the great work of my team, just to say they're apolitical. They're not out to get anybody. They don't care if somebody is a Democrat or a Republican or an independent or nonpartisan or what have you. They literally just care about what is the evidence, what is the law, how does it apply, what are the facts, the end. And I believe that's what they did in this instance.
Madam Attorney General, well, how much can you say about your assistant's interaction with Mike Shirkey and the level of cooperation he showed in the course of this investigation?
I know there was a lot of interaction with his attorney, right? Okay. So, is it fair to say that we had full cooperation from his lawyer?
think that's fair to say.
And Dave?
Dave Eggert with Crane. Did you talk to contributors to the two nonprofit groups, and if so, did you uncover who they are, and can you reveal who they are?
Yes, no. We did talk to them, we did identify them. It is likely that much of that will come out during the course of these cases, so we can't identify them right now. I expect that that will be part of the evidence during the course of the case.
Yeah, Matt?
Matt Miller from MLF. Depending on the resolution of this case, will the nonprofits be required to report who their donors are?
Oh, as a result of this case?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that there will be evidence in this case where people will see who the donors were, but it's not as though this adds an additional requirement that didn't already exist under the law. It'll just be part of the facts of the case.
All right, I get time for two more after Craig.
Did I hear correctly that you said you wanted to ban nonprofits from being able to give to ballot proposal committees? Is that, I thought you said that, but I wanted to check.
I don't think that was a specific, I think it was the transparency related portion that we talked about.
So,
Unless
so
I
what would you
misspoke.
like to see? I mean, nonprofits every cycle pour
Right.
millions of dollars, and I mean, this is not unusual
Yeah.
in terms of the giving itself.
Well, first of all, I think it's incredibly important that we know exactly, and I've said this many times in the past. First of all, who's donating, exactly who's donating, and how the money's being spent. And when I say how the money's being spent, and I will reference some of your many articles that you've written on this subject, Craig, you know, there is a minimal level of reporting of spending, but it's very vague, very vague. And so a person is left not understanding or knowing exactly how the money was spent, who it was spent on, how much things cost. There's certainly not receipts that are involved, anything of that nature. It's so different than, of course, whether the requirements of a ballot committee or for a candidate's own account, where you have to get down very granular and see the specificity involved with that. But there's a lot of different changes that I think can be made, perhaps should be made. And, you know, I'm not in the legislature. I've communicated a lot of this to a lot of different state reps and a lot of different state senators. And the secretary and I have talked about this with a great deal of frequency, and I know that she's very invested in substantive changes that allow for greater transparency and to the extent that it's possible to eliminate dark money as much as we can under our state laws. We don't work for the federal government, so obviously we can't be involved in everything at every level. But is there much more that we could be doing? Absolutely.
All right, appreciate everybody's time today.
Thanks, everyone.